Hi friends, it's Lauren Taylor. Thanks for joining me in my craft room today. It's been a little while and I know it's Saturday, but we're going to have some fun for Fandom Friday and use some Sassy Club, a 2-for-1 kind of day. I'm going to be using some of these adorable critter, forest friend, and honey jar themed products. So I have Bear and Pig stamp set, honey jar dies, and the forest friend 6x6 paper pad. I've done all my die cutting from the Honey Jar dies using different cardstock warehouse cardstocks. I'm using shades of brown, black, and yellow. I've stamped the adorable bear and pig image on some Express It cardstock with my Sassy Club Onyx black ink, and I'm going to be coloring with my Ohuhu art markers today. I'm going to do some very quick coloring. I am just getting back into the swing of things since returning from Seattle and Creativation, and I really just wanted to make sure I create something fun and worth sharing, but I didn't want to spend a lot of time, if I'm being honest, editing. So forgive me for the quick jumping today during coloring, but as always, you can find my marker caps on that little piece of mint tape in the top left-hand corner. So if you want to replicate the coloring with your Ohuhu art markers, you can find the markers at the top corner. I am using Honolulu bee markers, so there is a brush and nib end, and I'm just following what I would color my little bear and pig here. I am following the colors that I am using to create my own honey jar. So I have my yellow honey coming out of the honey jar. The top part is dark brown and the bottom part is a lighter brown, and that's what I have die cut my honey jar with. So I'm trying to give my shirt a little bit more definition. So just starting with my darkest colors, so just like I did with my little honey bear here, I started with actually the mid-tone of my colors. I am going to use the darkest one solely for shadow coloring only. And what I mean by that is that I'm going to start with my mid-tone as my, I guess, darker shade. And then I use the lighter color to color in the rest of the image. And then I bring in that really dark color to just be a shadow. I did it for my bear and I did it for his shirt, and I'll do it for my little pig friend as well. I didn't go into that much detail for the honey jar. There's just 2 shades, and that's because it's a bit of a smaller area to color. So I'm just doing this for my 2, I guess, larger images, even though my little pig is pretty tiny. So I did color in with a honey yellow for the bear, red for the shirt, and then I've already gone through the colors of the jar. I'm using red violet, so very pink colors for my little pig friend here. The arm on the left ended up being a little bit darker than I wanted, so I skipped over that coloring wise, but I'm just using the same RV colors to color him in. So he's kind of a monochrome feel. But I used the darkest shades of pink for his kind of like onesie thing, lighter pinks for his face, arms, and legs, and then a little bit darker pink for the nose and ears. Once I'm done coloring, I'm just going to fussy cut this image out. So I'm using my little scissors here. These are from Spellbinders. They are my favorite scissors in the world to fussy cut with. And you hold your scissors still and rotate your paper when you fussy cut. I am cutting in between my little bear and pig where the bear's foot kind of gets close to the pig. It's not quite thin enough to cut through. So I just use a hole punch. I punch a hole in the area that I want to cut, and then I just cut on the inside. To assemble the honey jar, I die cut the jar out of, like I said, this is stone cardstock, so the full honey jar, as well as this little stripe. And then out of Nubuck cardstock is this more darker brown. I die cut just the top of my honey jar, and I'm going to do a little bit of layering to create that two-tone look of the jar. I just don't want it to go past where my little strip is going to cover. So just using that as a guide to know where I can trim down that darker brown piece of cardstock. Using liquid adhesive, I'll go ahead and start assembling my jar. So I'll go ahead and glue the top part, which is that darker brown, right onto the top of that lighter brown jar. Then I'll add the stripe. I am just going to glue that pretty much to cover the, like, I'll say crease, but that's not the right word. Cover where the two pieces of cardstock overlap. And that just gives it a cleaner look, I think. Before I add the honey, I want to add a little bit of shading with some distress ink. So I'm going to skip that for now and move on to adding the word. I'm going to use the piece that I die cut from to be a guide of adding my letters to the jar. I think it's pretty centered, but I will just go with it. I think it looks good there. And even if it's not centered, it's going to be, it's a round jar, so it could be a little to the left, a little to the right, and it really wouldn't matter. I'm just gluing the letters and adding them into that negative piece, and then I will pull off the negative piece again, making sure my letters stay in place. And I love that. I think that looks so cute. Now we can move on to adding that distress ink. So I'm going to start with Vintage Photo, and I'm just going to use a blending brush and very lightly distress the edges of my honey jar. I'm going along the side, the bottom, the top, and I'm going to add a little bit to that opening in the center so that way it gets to the inside edges of the jar. For that inside jar piece, I'm going to darken that by just adding ink all over it. And then I brought in Wild Honey Distress ink. I think that was very fitting for the little honey drips that will be coming out of my jar. Once that is done, we'll continue assembling. So we'll go ahead and add liquid adhesive to the back of my little honey drips, and we'll add that to the jar. I was going to add the inside piece, but I realized there really wasn't much for it to cling onto. The honey didn't really have a lot of overlap into the opening of the jar, so we're just going to wait until we glue our jar to the card base to get that adhered. So I'll set that aside. My characters are done. I'm going to add a little bit of highlighting to them, but not until I'm done assembling the card. So I'm going to work on my very simple background today. Today's focus is the honey jar and the cute characters. So I'm going to make a very simple background. And I trimmed this really cute honey jar piece of pattern paper, again from the Forest Friends paper pad. And I trimmed it to be very slightly smaller than A2. So it's 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. And it's very busy on busy. And when that happens, I like to add vellum. So I'm going to cut this down to a 1/2 inch smaller than A2. So it is 3 3/4 by 5 inches. So it leaves a nice border. It kind of, creates that softer background. So I don't have busy on busy. It just adds a little bit of something in between. I'm going to use liquid adhesive to attach my honey jar because I wanted some wiggle room in case I didn't like where it landed. I'm adding liquid adhesive to what will be the inside of the jar, and I'm going to just puzzle piece that right inside. I start with turning it over on my glass board so that way if that little piece fell out, I had time to, pick it up before I got glue where I didn't want it to be on my card. And then I gently set it onto the vellum at a fun little angle. I want it to look like the honey was kind of tipping out, and just press that down once I was happy with the placement. I'm going to add a ton of foam adhesive behind my little pig and bear friends here. I peeled off all the release paper and then I'm attaching it to the vellum as well. And the reason why I'm working on the vellum is because I don't want my glue to show through the vellum. So I'm going to add adhesive behind the jar and behind my characters on the vellum. So when I attach it to my pattern paper, you don't see adhesive in areas where nothing is covering it because vellum will show that adhesive through. It's a very transparent cardstock. So that's just a way to make sure your glue isn't being shown where you have nothing to cover it. I hope that made sense. I use adhesive on the back of my pattern paper and attach that to my A2 card base, and I want to add a few gems. So I'm going to grab Prom Dress Confetti Embellishments from Pink and Maine. They're a very subtle pink color, and I thought it'd be fun to bring in more pink from my cute little pig onto the rest of the card. And they're pretty opaque, so you can still kind of see through it. It's not like a bright pink. I used my jewel picker to place them where I wanted and then pick them up, added liquid adhesive, and placed them back down. I added some white highlights to my cute little characters, a little bit to my honey. I wanted it to look shiny, and that will finish off my adorable card. I hope that this brought you some inspiration today. I love a good fandom video, especially with Sassy Club products. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click like, and if you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. As always, you can find everything I use down below in the description box. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye!